Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, Creator discusses the five selves of every human. So, most people think that maybe they exist in terms of their own conscious self and the subconscious. I mean, everybody's got an idea of the
I
subconscious.
can't hear Brian.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Carl? Hello?
I'm hearing you on a mic. I can't pick you up in my earphones.
You can hear me on the mic?
I can hear you. Yeah,
Okay, are we good to go, or is there a problem?
I'm okay if I'm not echoing.
Oh, you're not echoing, no.
Okay.
Okay. Apologize for that. We'll clean this up in the edit after the show's over, but we're live right now, so here we go. Creator discusses the five selves of every human. Everybody pretty much knows that they consist of their own consciousness and have a subconscious. A number of people do believe in a higher self, but there's two missing, and that would be a deep subconscious and a cellular consciousness. So five selves is in a lot of pieces and parts, Carl.
Well, and it's important information, it turns out, because it has a lot to do with why we're so difficult psychologically to stay on an even keel and struggle mightily often because of inner conflict going on. And we might not even be consciously aware of why that is and where the storm is raging. So this is a central issue in helping people to have emotional and mental health at a minimum. And of course, the body depends on a healthy mind also.
Well, these questions are derived from the work of Max Freedom Long. He was a researcher that did much of his research back in like the early part of the last century, 20s, 30s, 40s. Wrote a number of books on the Huna religion, which is the native religion of Hawaii and the Polynesian island regions. It's a fascinating religion. Most people are probably not aware of it, though they probably have heard the term Big Kahuna. So that's what we're basing most of our questions on, an examination of the different selves, and which is a very fascinating exploration. So you asked Creator Carl. Max Freedom Long was a researcher and author of numerous books on the Polynesian religious and belief system known as Huna. What he has revealed in his writings can help shed light on a number of human spiritual mysteries. One aspect that received a lot of attention and focus is the triune spiritual structure of the typical human being, consisting of low self, middle self, and high self. Long wrote in his book, What Jesus Taught in Secret, a Huna interpretation of the four Gospels. The original secret taught that these three parts of the mind were not parts of each other, but three separate things or selves, which were joined in the closest possible association in man. Jesus even taught that the light self was so close and intimately attached to man that it might be called the God within. What is Creator's perspective?
All right. And this is what I've channeled from Creator. These are Creator's words. The teachings of Jesus Christ about the mind were much more extensive and profound than reflected in the scriptures. And that is a function of the handling of information in those ancient times and the ease with which things could be altered and then further confused through mistranslations, going from language to language, and biased in the mind of the translator by individual limitations and perspective to understand shades of meaning, and much was lost along the way. The idea of levels of the mind being essentially separate selves is highly accurate. Because each level of the mind has its own consciousness, it is possible for the conscious self to be told things by the upper subconscious level, and that corresponds to the middle self and a portion of the low self, respectively. The high self is an interposed conscious entity that is in between your soul and the physical extension you are experiencing as yourself incarnated in the physical. The high self remains within the divine realm and only communicates to you intuitively. So, this is very subtle if recognized at all, and will depend on one's openness and freedom from corruption, as there are many ways that communication link gets strained and even extinguished. That more divine part of you, the high self, the light self, it is intimately attached because its very existence and role is to oversee your experiences in the physical and provide guidance and support through inspiration that will bubble up from the subconscious or low self portion of the person and seem like one's own thoughts, even though they are truly coming from above. What this means is that each person has a link to the divine that is built in and can be called on by your own desire and intention. The difficulty is that the subconscious part of the mind stays in the background for the most part and is little appreciated. The greatest problem you face with regard to the workings of the mind and having limitations is that the largest part of the mind is an even deeper level, what your channel has termed the deep subconscious, and is his discovery he made in working with clients intuitively from a distance and noting there was a portion he could communicate with outside of conscious or even subconscious awareness. Because it is the largest part of the mind and has the greatest intuitive reach, when it becomes troubled by reviewing intuitively many problems from your past, it cannot discuss that with you on a conscious level, nor signal in a precise way you might be in danger or something is likely to go wrong. Based on prior experience, your deep subconscious is seeing that is likely to happen. Because the deep subconscious controls much of the function of the physical body, including emotions, it can only create tension, anxiety, and fear in order to get your attention. That is a crude signal at best and mostly contributes to chronic unhappiness rather than enlightenment. So, this idea of levels of the mind being separate functionally is a very important insight because it is the key to mastery of the self as an integrated whole and become focused on aspirations and goals that serve the soul journey and keep people on track, working towards something better. When the levels of the mind are not only failing to be aligned, but at war with one another, this is a prescription for disaster and is the reason for many emotional problems and even physical ones related to the stress that is caused from all that inner tension and warfare with oneself.
I have a question, Carl. Um, so we learn in a later question that our middle self, our conscious self, is like a guest in the body. That's literally said verbatim. Uh, the deep subconscious, is it your understanding that the deep subconscious is completely outside the body? And maybe the upper subconscious is actually within the body. Would that be a fair distinction?
Consciousness is outside of the body. Your mind is literally outside your body. It's all a kind of different energy vibrationally than your physical body. It is more like a communication medium to move intention around as an expression of the soul, because that's where it is launched from. But it is not in the body, it is interplaying in communication with the body. So, this is why the brain is not the seat of conscious experience or creator of the conscious appreciation of things. It is merely a reporting mechanism. It's an organ to receive consciousness and then experience it physically. So the best analogy the creator has used before is that of a television set.
Mhm.
The brain is like a TV set, and it is consciousness that provides programming. But the TV is just a display. It isn't creating the signal. The signal comes from miles away. And before that, back in time and so on. So it's much the same with the mind and the body. The mind communicates with the body through the brain at the conscious level and to the physical parts through other mechanisms and means.
Okay. U.S. creator Long wrote, one of the outstanding parts of the secret that Jesus was sharing with his disciples, was the knowledge that only the subconscious self had the ability to use telepathy. And as all prayer had to go to the superconscious or higher self telepathically, the prayers had to be made into thought forms and given to the subconscious to transmit to the superconscious higher self. The making of a prayer for a miracle was based in large part on this mechanism. And I just want to stress this was what Long heard from the kahunas. When he had conversations with the kahunas, he then took what they were teaching and then tried to apply that to what Jesus was possibly teaching without knowing exactly. And that's essentially what we're asking here. We're asking, this is Long's interpretation. What does Creator have to tell us about it, Carl?
All right. And Creator says this description captures the essence of the issue of communication with the divine level, that at best it is only a whisper that is only possible to do intuitively. But it has the issue stated in a backwards fashion, that what limits the creation of a robust, easily discernible, and accurate conversation with the higher self is not that the physical human is unable to reach it other than telepathically via the subconscious mind or low self sending an intuitive message. The higher self hears your thoughts with total clarity every moment, regardless of what might be happening in the state of your energy. The problem is on the human end in receiving clear messages with understanding of their meaning and intention, unfiltered and unaltered, and in total rather than a fragmentary impression, which at times is all that gets through, particularly if someone is under stress. And that can come from a state of chronic anxiety and not just circumstances of the moment when there might be competing outside sources of stimulation wanting your attention, for example. In actuality, anytime you pray, both the higher self and creator will be aware of it, as well as your spirit guide or guides, as well as guardian angels, because a petition to the divine realm is a petition to the divine realm. Who you petition will govern who can answer. So if you make an appeal to a religious figure, such as Jesus Christ or Mohammed, they must handle the request and God will stand aside. If you make a petition to God, the Almighty, Allah, in whatever form you believe is the highest and holiest, it is that ultimate being who can then weigh in on your behalf with much greater power to change things for the better. This is why we have told your channel that when people use prayer or simply want higher sources of support, that they make an appeal that always includes Creator, even if they have another figure or figures they have befriended and hold as personally important in their way of thinking and doing things, to interact with sources of wisdom and the light. That gives you the greatest range of possibilities in having your desires acted upon fully and with the greatest level of intelligence, ingenuity, and capability to make things happen for your benefit. This is especially important when others are involved in bringing about a change that benefits your life. There are many rules of engagement in terms of altering the free will of others and so on. So the highest level of authority can work to your advantage. We have recommended through your channel that people make appeals both to their higher self and to Creator because the higher self has a special duty to serve you. that is uppermost in its awareness and desire, whereas Creator must serve all beings equally. And in divine matters, it is very much the same as the physical plane, that two heads are better than one. The other reason to make an appeal to the highest level or include the highest level among a group of beings you wish to have help from is that the size of the problem you need solved might be truly enormous if it is based on a long history of karmic trauma from many lifetimes, as is fairly typical of humans at this point. You have all lived so many lives and done so little healing along the way for all the bad things that happened. You are truly coming from behind, and every difficulty has become a monumental task because of the backlog of unmet need that is piled on. So, even a current life situation will often be seen by the law of karma, and many old problems will be added on top because they resonate and energetically are so similar. The law of karma will see your new problem as an opportunity to address a broad issue of like circumstances, grievances, failures, or victimizations. So, having the most divine firepower working on even a small problem is a good idea.
So essentially, in summary, what the question was asking was, do all prayers have to throw through the subconscious mind to get to the higher self and beyond? And Creator's saying here, no, that's not the way it works. That you're being heard by both the higher self and Creator as a middle self offering the prayer. The subconscious is not a necessary conduit. However, we learn in later questions, Carl, that it can make a difference on its own.
Yes, well, it has a lot of functional influence on you as a being and how you experience things, how you think, how you feel, how you act, your choices, and the integration with your past. And many things it does are consequential, if indirect. So the limitation in really appreciating the fact that divine realm is real, God is real, and all these beings people talk about, angels and guides and so on, are real entities, but they may not be able to communicate with you because your apparatus is damaged. This link intuitively is diminished in humans. This is a defect. So we know a lot about that, and it's a sad tale, but it does make us more limited. And for one thing, it discourages faith
Yep.
because
Yep.
we don't get a strong message from above. We get barely a whisper, as Creator has put it.
So an analogy is that the microphone's working, but the headphones are not.
There you
Or
go. Yeah,
yeah,
good analogy.
yeah.
Perfect.
U.S. creator Long wrote, the conscious self is involved in the process of prayer in that it makes the thought forms of the prayer and instructs the subconscious to send vital force with the telepathic prayer to the superconscious higher self. So what we're asking here essentially is, is the subconscious sending life force energy back, to basically empower our prayer? That's essentially the question that's being asked here, Carl. What can Creator tell us?
All right. And Creator says, all who pray are using their conscious mind and creating along with it an intention to send a communication to the divine realm. That is an act of consciousness and is, in effect, a creation of the mind. Thoughts are literally things, an energy that persists and will be stored and housed in a repository of consciousness that is both local in a thought plane, that is a personal repository, and that in turn connects with a repository of collective consciousness that is more precisely termed the collective unconscious, because it is not consciously perceived but interacted with by the subconscious mind, especially the deep subconscious. It is not correct that the subconscious must make the communication using its vital force as a telepathic prayer to the higher self. The subconscious mind can mount prayers of its own if it learns to do this and is motivated to do so. But ordinary prayer, that is an intent of a person to carry out, involves a direct communication with the divine that commences with their very thought to reach out and talk with a higher source. It is conveyed intuitively, but as consciousness, not as a vital force that is the same as that which animates the body. So it is a vital force of a different nature. And that is the demarcation between the life force energy, keeping the physical body alive, and consciousness that creates the differing levels of the mind. The reality of things is that you are an extension of Creator's consciousness, and we are always present within your being and privy to your thoughts with no exceptions. We are literally sharing your life with you. So when you wish to speak with us, we will always hear you. And in addition, that communication will be shielded, so it is invisible to any other consciousness beyond the self. That is important to know because communicating with the divine is a birthright and inviolate and ensures your safety in doing so, no matter what the circumstances might be.
So we learn an important distinction in this answer, Carl, that the subconscious is not necessary to mount a prayer, but Creator goes right on to say the subconscious can mount prayers of its own. And that's an important insight right there.
Well, this is in keeping with the idea we have things to learn here, that we're a multi-partied entity. We have five different minds, basically. And there is a bit of a challenge involved in keeping all that going and working as a team, which would be the ideal. And that really is unlikely to happen under current circumstances.
Oh, well, we are talking a lot about prayer in this show, and the very best prayers are the empowered prayers that are tailored in such a way that you're giving specific instructions to the divine realm in terms of what you want to see happen. Because if you just send a generic prayer, that's nice. It might add some energy to things, but it's like anything else. If you want something specific, it helps to make specific prayers about what you want. And the best way to do that is empowered prayer. And you can get our prayer book that can help you with that. It has a whole list of prayers for all kinds of things that are important in life. Get that at getwisdom.com/prayer, getwisdom.com/prayer. And while you're at it, download the book on the Lightworker Healing Protocol. You can get that at getwisdom.com/LHP, getwisdom.com/LHP. Carl, you asked Creator, Long wrote, if the low self does not desire to have a prayer answered, low self meaning subconscious mind at this point, if the low self does not desire to have a prayer answered, it will not do its part in the work and the effort is useless. Also, if the low self fears the change of the new, it will block the path. This is what the kahunas taught Long, and then Long wrote about it. So we're going to ask Creator's perspective on this. What is Creator's perspective? Carl? Carl, do you have your mic muted? Carl, do you want to try to maybe drop and reconnect? I'm going to go ahead and start reading the answer. Hopefully, Carl will find a way to reconnect here. This is what Creator answered. It is correct that the low self or subconscious levels of the mind can have their own perspective and agenda and may not be on board with a conscious desire to pray for something in particular, but they are not the gatekeeper for what the conscious self desires to happen in terms of communication. So we will always hear what the conscious mind wants to tell us and ask of us. With the possibility of competing and discordant agendas, let me get Carl back on here. Carl, can you hear me? Carl, can you hear me? No, I'm still not hearing Carl. I'll continue with the answer. So I'll start with the top of the paragraph. It is very common, in fact, that the subconscious mind becomes heavily corrupted by dark spirit attachments. There's also much programming of the subconscious mind by extraterrestrial interlopers via your technologies. Whenever you're watching a screen, a television, a cell phone, or a computer, for example, there will be communication beaming to you to alter your beliefs and emotions on a subconscious level. This complicates your life because you will be living with competing interests and agendas by different parts of your being. And the danger is that the views of the darkness might win out through the persistent presence of these corruptions in thinking that will filter up to the conscious level and begin to bias you to accept something unnatural that will work against your best interests. This is why people are typically in warring camps, each of which might have diametrically opposed views. This is not natural because truth is the truth. Both camps cannot be right, but the ability to hold a strong ideological perspective in the face of evidence of its faultiness constitutes a kind of brainwashing that has taken place. All people are a mix of truth and untruth in the form of fixed beliefs that are programmed in through exposure to such influences. This is a massive healing need and opportunity to bring yourself as a being back into harmony and divine alignment. For that to happen requires rooting out bones of contention, points of friction, illogical conflicting beliefs, and especially many negative self limiting beliefs that diminish your sense of self to feel unworthy and powerless. Your world is being subjugated, and this is the main way it is carried out, corrupting your mind to turn against you. Carl, you back with us? Oh, we're still not picking him up.
Hello, can you hear
Oh,
me?
yes, I can hear you now, Carl. Welcome
Oh,
back.
sorry about that.
That's okay. So, Creator was expanding on this answer, this question, and talking about how the subconscious mind can become heavily corrupted by dark spirit attachments, and in a sense, be co-opted to send differing messages that can, and feelings that can conflict with your own conscious desires and ideas and beliefs, and create a kind of an inner war or turmoil that can really sideline you, essentially. So there's it, what Creator is saying here is that if the subconscious does have fears, does have issues with the prayer that you're sending, that it can impair, Creator's going to have to listen to both prayers, right? So you're sending a prayer for one thing. If the subconscious is sending out a radiating fear about what would be manifested by that prayer, Creator has to like honor both intentions that are coming at you, coming at Creator essentially. So it's a little bit complex, don't you think?
Well, it's not only complex, it is potentially devastating because everything the divine does and does not do on our behalf must be led and asked for by us. So if we're a mixed bag, if part of us is saying yes, part of us is saying no, Creator has to stand aside. That's one of the rules of engagement. So many people have very negative beliefs, negative God beliefs, not trusting God, believing God doesn't care about them, believing God has abandoned them, and so on. People actually have such beliefs. You can test for this and demonstrate this is so. And they may reside deep within the being, but it can be enough to keep God at arm's length. So you can be a devout religious person and go to church or synagogue and mosque and pray religiously all your life long. But if part of you is digging in its heels and saying no to God, God has to honor that part just every bit as much as your conscious intention and all the motions you're going through to be a devout worshiper and believer.
Well,
So
that
this is a healing opportunity. This
yes,
needs healing big time. And that's one of the things we do in Get Wisdom is wrestle with these kinds of issues. That's why we're probing to understand our being on a deeper level, because that is the key to true enlightenment, which is a healing of all of this discord.
absolutely. We are trying to heal issues, And while it might be, disconcerting, I think is a good word for this, to learn that the subconscious can actually interfere with your praying to the Almighty because it's essentially launching its own prayers that are in opposition to yours. It also throws some explanation on the issue about why maybe you're not having your prayers answered the way you want. There's reasons for that. And it's better to know what the reasons are than not, because that does give us an avenue to maybe do something about it. So this is an important lesson that Creator is sharing with us, Carl.
Yeah. And you likely need help with this. This is not easy to do at home.
No, no, it's not. U.S. Creator Long wrote, in Hawaii, when the missionaries arrived, the kahunas marveled that they made their prayers with no careful preparation ahead of this, and especially without the slow and deeper breathing to accumulate mana, or vital force, to send with the prayer when it was put into words. The kahunas shook their heads and said, these people, the missionaries, the Western missionaries that arrived, are without breath, and their prayers are without mana or vital force. Therefore, the white people became known as the breathless ones, Ahaol, which means without breathing. What is Creator's perspective?
All right. And this is what Creator tells us. This question and description allows us to better interpret the meaning of mana as used by the kahunas. Using the breath to animate a prayer, charge it with energy, is literally an enhancement that adds a greater intention to that creation of consciousness that constitutes the prayer itself. As with all thoughts, they constitute a form of energy that can have lesser or greater force as well as the meaning of the thoughts themselves. A fleeting idle notion has little impact on anything. A powerful moment of awakening and clarity that becomes a turning point, as in hitting rock bottom and making a decision to change things for the better, is a life altering example of thought in action. A prayer can be done as a dull ritual out of habit, going along with a congregation gathered at worship without the heart truly being in it. Perhaps if the person is distracted by something in their life and wishing they were somewhere else, and so on. Or prayer can be fervent, heartfelt, and have extreme power of intention, as when someone is praying for the life of a loved one that hangs in the balance. What the principles of Huna were teaching was that prayer can be empowered through physical maneuver that acts as a kind of energetic ramping up of the being to focus and launch the prayer using the breath as a physical ritual. That keeps the entire being, mind included, on the matter at hand. And with that physical reinforcement, the entire being is projecting a total concentration and focus on the intention of the prayer being launched without distraction and providing a consistent high level energetic launching compared to the vagaries of thoughts and impulses that come and go just within the mind itself, all of which are relatively subtle and present quite briefly. Taking the time to perform a ritual to launch a prayer in combining a physical act like using the breath, for example, to further empower its launching creates intention all along the way. So rather than a fleeting thought that lasts only as long as it takes to think the words or read the words from a prayer book, there is great feeling and a time component during which the mind is intent on launching that prayer and wanting it to have an effect. The divine pays much more attention to what the intentions of a prayer are than the words used to say them or think them. In other words, you cannot fool the divine. If you are saying a prayer by rote with little feeling or thought in any kind of deep way about who the prayer is for and why, there is very little the divine can do to act on that prayer because there is little human intention to work with. In contrast, a fervent prayer that is heartfelt and soul stirring because you care deeply about what you ask for and how it is desired to change something for the better, there will be a much more powerful energy of intention attached to those words. And that intention energy will persist and is used as the fuel. So, a prayer that is sincere and not just paying lip service to a routine practice will have a much greater body of fuel for the divine to put the prayer into action, unlike in a worship service where someone's mind might be wandering, and if they're tired, maybe just going through the motions.
Well, there's a lot of great distinction here, I think. Because on the one hand, Creator is not coming out and saying that breathing exercises are necessary to launch a prayer. That's clearly not what Creator is saying. And Creator's probably not even saying that breathing is necessary in order to intensify a prayer either. However, it can be helpful to do so, I think is what Creator is saying here. Is that what you're seeing, Carl?
Yes, and there are other ways to do so. For example, praying aloud may well bring with it a greater intention because you have lots of thoughts, a lot of things that just come and go, mind chatter, you just keep to yourself. But when you speak to someone, you're intending for that to have some kind of impact. Maybe just a sharing, just hoping they'll listen, but maybe something really important that you want to enlighten them about. And so it's the same with prayer. So if you say prayer aloud, if you stand and launch it, speak in a loud voice, it all ramps up physically with your focus and the time it takes to do that, which is a little longer than just to think it or read it in a written prayer. So these are just examples. This isn't a restrictive list, but it's all addressing that there is a mechanism for increasing your desire for a divine intervention. And a divine intervention is the goal. So, any way you can get there and more effectively is worth knowing about.
Well, I've come up with a new term that I'm playing around with. Pray like you mean it. I mean, you really, if you want a prayer to be answered, you got to have your as much of your whole heart, mind, and soul invested in that prayer as possible. Pray like you mean it. Um, you know, it, any prayer is helpful, but it's a question of how important and how effective it's going to be, and how much attention the divine realm is going to pay to it, and that's going to be in pretty much direct proportion to the amount of intention, which is really the amount of concentration, the amount of energy, the amount of focus that you can apply to the prayer.
Yeah, there are many nuances and opportunities to do things better. This is no different than any other activity in life. You can be a rank beginner, you can be an expert, and somewhere in the middle is where most of us are. But there are ways to open the heart, and some of that is learned through practice. And that's why regular prayer is so very important because it helps teach you how, it makes it a comfortable exercise you will start to believe in, and it's creating a relationship, a partnership with the divine all along the way. And that will make you more powerful as a giver of prayer, a launcher of prayer, because that confidence, that belief quotient, all factors in.
Yep, absolutely. U.S. creator Long wrote, "In Huna, we learn that we attract evil spirits to us only in and to the degree of our own evil." What is creator's perspective?
All right. And Creator says this can be seen as literally correct in a broad philosophical perspective, but it is unduly harsh to the ear of the average person who already might be feeling vulnerable and on the spot when scrutinized by Creator in terms of fearing judgment and blame for failures and misgivings and doubts and poor judgment at times and so on, the many frailties and foibles of human existence. Where this is literally correct is in the sense that if you are in perfect divine alignment, holding your space with a high spiritual vibration, you can become impervious to the influence via attachment of spirit meddlers who would seek to drag you down and rob you of energy and thus undermine you in various ways, and in some would be heavily corrupting and even capable of tipping the person into mental illness. Perfection is a very high standard indeed. Most people are somewhere on their way to a state of enlightenment, meaning to be not only in the know, but healed and have no inner vulnerabilities. At this point in time, all human beings are walking wounded and often to a considerable degree. We do not judge people when they have struggles and might be vulnerable to attacking spirits who gain a foothold and then begin to carry out a campaign of terror to undermine that person. They work in very covert and insidious ways at first because they can talk to the deep subconscious and carry out severe bullying and torment a person consciously who will be completely unaware of this, even as their being is in the process of alteration and further weakening to undermine them. This can lead to all kinds of problems. First of all, anxiety, and then various associated symptoms like sleeplessness, poor job performance, troubled relationships, and even destructive impulses at times that get a person into trouble. There is an almost endless list of mischief dark spirits can cause. We do not judge. We want health, happiness, and safety for all. The best solution for the risk of existence in the physical plane is to stand strong by being in divine alignment. You will get that way by engaging with effective healing strategies to repair karmic liabilities that make you vulnerable and work to change many types of energies within the being, which add to strength and resilience and a defense from outside intruding consciousness. That can be done in a general way through using empowered prayer, but much more powerfully through the Lightworker Healing Protocol to work on shoring up your defenses and healing the backlog of unneeded or unhealed karmic trauma that you carry.
Well, the Lightworker Healing Protocol is certainly important. And I think some of the lessons we're looking at here, Carl, in this show is that concentration, being there in the moment, whether it's doing an empowered prayer or the entire Lightworker Healing Protocol, which, admittedly can take some time to get through, coming at it at your best, where you're alert, where you're awake, and where you're focused and not distracted, is very, very important. And this is a good time to emphasize that. But again, speaking of the LHP, good time to download it, getwisdom.com/LHP. But there's important lessons here, Carl.
Yes, this is a learning exercise and an important one because Creator's giving us the keys to the kingdom here, the keys to well-being. We have to tackle these speed bumps and pitfalls if we're ever going to advance, because this is a major aspect of why we're so diminished and held back and held down and struggle so in our lives.
Yeah. U.S. creator Long wrote, "The high self is said to lack mana or vital force or life force energy because it has no physical body and to depend on the low self for what it needs in its ordinary activities when away from the lower man. When we are asleep, it is supposed to touch us and take a little mana or life force energy, but for the heavy changes needed to work in the materials of the dense or physical world, much mana or vital force is needed." So basically, what Long is asking and suggesting here is that um, in order for the higher self to perform miracles in the physical world, the higher self is going to require some form of energy coming from the physical world to work in the physical world. It's kind of an idea of like and like, and that we have to deliver the energy the higher self needs in order to perform the miracle coming back. And this is a kahuna belief. This is what they actually believe. We're asking Creator, is this true? So what can Creator tell us, Carl?
Well, you're carefully explaining it, but it is wrong. So,
Yeah, I'm
and
explaining what the kahunas believe,
I
but we're
understand,
learning.
and
Yeah,
well, I think
yeah,
the take home message here is that we didn't do this to beat up on the Huna religious teachings, but it is instructive because all religions have faulty elements in their doctrine. And this is because humans are faulty and incomplete. And religion is a human enterprise, truly. And that's how it was concocted by people and with divine prophecy and so forth, and a lot of intuitive awarenesses feeding the creation of the beliefs and the rituals and so on. But it's not all literally correct, and so this is a way of gaining ground and wanting to advance the dialogue because we can. We don't have to work out of a 2,000-year-old handbook. We can go to the source. So this is what Creator says about the higher self needing this energy again. This is a misguided understanding of the independence of the higher self from the physical level, the physical being you experience as an incarnated human. You are tethered to your higher self, but it receives its energy for existence from the divine realm via your soul. So it is not dependent on any kind of vital force or life force energy coming from below. It is more, again, the opposite, that the higher self can regulate the life force energy sent to the physical body and the energy layers it comprises. And so it is a gatekeeper seeing to your welfare, physical life support from moment to moment, and has an important role in adjusting things as needed in a dynamic fashion when called for. So, in moments of stress, high energy demands, and severe emotional disturbances, the higher self will send more life force energy to meet the local needs. So you have energy to work with to deal with a crisis. It is true there is an interaction during sleep by the higher self. It has a role in body maintenance, which is largely enacted during the sleep time when there is a physical quiescence. That is when much repair is done for ongoing maintenance, replenishment, reconstitution, and some resolution of difficulties from the prior day's events so that memories are consolidated for long term storage if warranted, and many things of a trivial nature are let go of as unneeded, and so on. But it is the higher self that is more running the show than the body in terms of source of energy and its applications.
I think there's an important insight here, Carl. People think that the body is basically animated and maintained by the subconscious mind, and that's largely true. Beats the heart and moves the blood and lots of other things that go on that we're not aware of and can't even stop if we try. For the most part, most of us anyway. But the thing about the subconscious is it's not an analytical thinker, right? It's not an analyzer. It basically operates on programming, instinct, so on. Um, but we're learning here that there is uh, a much more powerful analytical being that can use discretion and not just operate out of programming, not hardwired at all, but actually can use discernment and discretion to make adjustments in the body for different things. And I think this is an important insight. This is something that I'm really thinking about myself for the first time.
Yeah, and this is worth probing further. And keep in mind as well, the higher self is a member of the divine realm.
Yeah. Hmm.
So talk about us being divine humans and actually lofty and connected directly in our origin to Creator itself. This is another proof positive that is so.
Absolutely. This is a anticipated question. Long wrote about the Kahuna interpretation of Christ's crucifixion. The Kahunas basically said, his weakness has been self righteousness, the cardinal sin of the highest spiritual level. He had been held back by his desire to enjoy the fruits of his labors. His pride had betrayed him and laid him open to obsession by certain spirits who were evil because they forced on him the emotions of pride, which were their own besetting sins in life. Now, this is what the Kahunas are saying. We're not endorsing this, we're just sharing what their perspective was. As the curtain falls on the last scenes of the drama of the crucifixion, all seems to be lost. And on the cross, the man who had worked miracles called on the Father for help, and his prayers were cut off. It was not delivered and not heard because, as the kahunas speculate, because of the blocking done by evil spirits obsessing him, having gained unnoticed entry on account of the buildup of personal pride during his ministry. Christ suffered the most agonizing of deaths. What can Creator tell us about this kahuna interpretation?
Okay, and just parenthetically, I would extend my prior comment about religions having some misguided notions. Maybe the only more troubling thing is when they try to reinterpret other religions
Yeah.
and do it through their own filter and so on. So stay with us. This is what Creator says about this view of Jesus Christ and his struggle. This is an overlay of a general scenario that is all too common in how people meet their end of life, heavily encumbered by the negative karmic buildup of their own travails, and in addition, infested with dark spirit attachments, the spirit meddlers, who will do their utmost to reawaken the sore points and triggers of sources of pain and suffering from other lifetimes, and conduct a reign of terror, convincing their host all is lost and they are a failure and powerless to change things, and may well cause physical discomfort and pain to reinforce the point. The agony of Christ, knowing he would soon meet his fate, was quite real, and his only failing was a wavering of faith in himself, that he could stand strong as an example to all in the face of unbelievable hatred and cruelty inflicted on him as an icon to make him an example to others who do not submit to the power of the state and its representatives. This was a human weakness, but inevitable, given that Christ was not superhuman, but a human being capable of interacting with the divine and be imparted with divine wisdom that made him above others and a threat to the establishment because truth is powerful. But being human, the reality is that he was vulnerable, as all humans are. So the fact he was crucified was not a personal failing in any sense. He was a victim of the era, and the only way it could have been avoided was if he had compromised on his mission to stand up and speak truth to power in ways he did that drew the ire of the powers that be who condemned and killed him. So it was an act of courage as well as faith, because if he lacked courage or sufficient faith, in the end, he would have avoided that dark fate by allowing himself to be visibly subjugated and diminished in accepting condemnation falsely. Instead, he held his ground in representing the cause of the divine, and that led directly to his death. It was a noble and courageous act. Whether he wavered along the way in having a long period of buildup to this inevitable confrontation and ultimate sacrifice is unimportant. It was a testament more to the extreme degree of his sacrifice and personal suffering that was his fate. That humanness is a testament to the reality he was immortal and felt all of the pain involved with his torture and execution. And that is what makes it a noble sacrifice indeed.
Well, there's an awful lot to parse out here for sure. But we are learning that basically Creator is disagreeing with the Kahuna interpretation in the sense that he was probably infested with dark spirits or anything like that. However, Creator is saying that Christ was human in addition to having access to the divine and being in alignment with the divine. He was indeed human and probably hoped to avoid this fate. He knew it was likely, especially through his actions, which were directly, speaking truth to power, and he was not unaware of the likely consequences. But just like we buy a lottery ticket and hope to win, Christ was probably hoping to avoid it somehow, some way. But when that became clear that that was not going to happen, he mustered the courage and did his very best to act with courage to go through the ordeal. But again, being human, if he, had some anxiety about it, that would be perfectly understandable, Carl.
Absolutely. And this is really an important point of differentiation. If Christ was bestowed with godlike powers to be impervious to pain, going through what he faced up to and endured would have had much less meaning and significance than to be alongside all of humanity, vulnerable as they are and as we are today, and stood up to power and faced the consequences. That as a human, they were able to overwhelm him. But that was the point of his mission life, to serve as an icon of the divine and show that contrast, evil overpowering truth.
Yes. Yes, Creator. Can Creator tell us how empowered prayer and the Lightworker healing protocol are the best modern means to heal the relationships among the multiple selves of the human being?
All right, and Creator tells us, despite the appeal of scientific inquiry and modern technological progress, the reality is that when it comes to the business of life, and especially the struggle to maintain it, science is far from able to deal with the many threats humans face in having even a normal lifespan. Medicine is still largely a kind of band aid, providing more symptomatic relief than cures. The many sources of difficulty, interpersonal strife, impaired function, chronic unhappiness, and the consequences on a societal level with dysfunctional institutions, poor governance, widespread inequality and unfairness, limited personal liberty, or safeguarding of human rights in many areas of the world, and the ever present war going on somewhere are a testament to the many challenges facing you personally and collectively. You need divine help for all of these difficulties. History has shown it is not possible for humans to achieve long term stability and abundance for all. This is not because humans are unworthy or being punished by God. It is because you are being manipulated by interlopers, both dark spirits and an extraterrestrial alliance that seeks your diminishment and ultimate annihilation. You cannot contend with these forces using human tools and capabilities. You are no match for the darkness. You need the light and its greater power. That can be invited through empowered prayer, which is the most effective form of prayer you can use because it is informed by the nature of the problems on a deep level underlying these negative circumstances we have recounted. Without that specificity, appeals for help will be weak because they do not contain any useful instructions for the divine in what you want to see happen, nor is there any understanding on the human side of how the divine operates and how it can intervene to change things for the better. That is where the Lightworker healing protocol comes in, because your channel, through his research and steady probing to learn more and more about how healing is brought about, has put together a comprehensive protocol that can address all sources of human negativity, whether occurring at the hands of dark spirits, extraterrestrial intruders, or human perpetrators, as well as natural hazards and the buildup of negative karmic potentials that will weaken you steadily from life to life until effective healing is brought to bear. Until now, this has not been fully possible because of the state of human ignorance. Using the Lightworker healing protocol is the route to your salvation because it is able to save and heal humanity if enough people add their intention for it to be applied in earnest. There is time to turn things around if more are awakened and join the cause to use these tools and their personal intention for the betterment of all. Humans need to come together and appeal to the divine in a meaningful way with specificity and sufficient specific instructions about the problems and the healing methods that are needed. This has not happened heretofore because this is part of the learning curve inherent with your struggle to understand and overcome adversity. That always requires an understanding and a level of sophistication to appreciate the inner workings of things and what solution fits the problem. All that has happened through the ages are weak and non-specific pleas for mercy, pleas for help, pleas for rescue. They are always met with sympathy. But sympathy cannot fix anything. There needs to be a plan and its implementation. The more you can define what you want to see happen specifically, the more powerfully we can respond with effective solutions. You can save the day by making a high level informed prayer request for healing through the Lightworker Healing Protocol. That is what it is designed to do and represents the very thing needed to save and heal humanity.
Wow, that last paragraph, Carl, is one to be highlighted and underlined. That is a very, very important and powerful summation about the work that we're doing with Get Wisdom. That this solution is new to humanity. And all as old as the earth is, there has never been a complete understanding of what's actually needed until now. Creator says this point blank right here that throughout history there's been weak pleas for help. And that's really all that prayer has been for thousands of years. And only now do we have the insight that comes as a result of the learning that we've undergone to understand what the problem is and fit a proper solution to it.
Yeah, and this is a sea change. This is a shift, a frame shift in perspective. All these centuries, the religions, by and large, have been geared towards being subservient, being meek and humble and a supplicant, and bowing down and worshiping the divine, spending lots and lots of time and energy worshiping the divine. Well, that's not the same as asking for help to solve your problems. That is an exercise that God doesn't really need. God needs us to stand up, embrace our right as an extension of the Creator to serve the cause of the divine and make good things happen in the physical plane. We're in charge here.
Yes.
So, if we spend all our energy worshiping at a shrine, that's not going to fix the world. It just is not. And that's what God is telling us here.
Well, we keep hearing about like worshiping the divine, paying homage to the divine. But when have you heard about directing the divine, right? I mean, direct the divine, that sounds like it's not respectful. Well, that's got nothing to, this is what creator is set up. This is what a partnership involves. A partnership is being on equal ground. It's not a hierarchy. And creator is inviting us as a species of consciousness to partner with God in the divine realm, to stand up, with confidence and not be subservient, but to be in a cooperative uh, enterprise. Essentially, this is what the physical world is intended to be: is a partnership with the divine. And so it's not disrespectful to suggest that really what we need to do is direct the divine to what we want to see happen. That's what Creator's telling us to do.
Yes. And our empowerment is not some misguided attempt to make ourselves God's equal. God is so far above us, it's truly laughable. I mean, we're so feeble and so incapable of doing things. That's not the issue or the problem or the dilemma. It's that we don't know about the paradigm we're in, that we inexplicably were created to solve the problem of evil. We're the boots on the ground, and we have to be in charge of the divine solution. We have to learn our way to that understanding to prove our capability to find the true answer. And that was left up to us as a channel, as a challenge.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just God telling us what to do. And
Yeah.
that's not the same thing as us stepping into a kind of power. And that's what Creator wants us to do as a representative, not to be God or to replace God, but to reflect and draw from that heritage and that origin and do what we do wisely and well because we are in a partnership that can call on divine wisdom and employ it effectively.
Well, I think an analogy is if you're trying to teach a student, let's say you're a mature teacher, you've been teaching for 30 years, right? So you're in your late 40s, early 50s, and you're teaching a young child. And you sit back and you instruct the young child to say, okay, tell me what to do. And why would you do that, right? You already know what to do. You've already been around the block. It's not about you. It's about empowering the child so that the child learns, you know. And essentially, we're the child that God is telling us, okay, tell me what to do. It's a learning lesson.
Yes. Yeah, that's the point. And so we're on this learning curve, but it's deadly serious.
Yeah, it's
and
not fun and
and the
games.
survival of humanity is at stake and in the balance.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for this week's Get Wisdom Live, Carl. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Be well.